My name is Marilyn Foster. I am 72 years old. 3 months ago, I sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, eating cold toast in complete silence. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me. The clock above the stove ticked louder than usual. And for the first time in my life, I admitted something to myself. I was completely alone. Not because I lived alone. My husband was upstairs sleeping in our bedroom. We had been married for 48 years. But loneliness can sit beside you even in a full house. Maybe you understand that feeling too. We lived in a small town outside of Dayton, Ohio. Nothing fancy. Just quiet streets, old trees, and neighbors who mostly stayed inside these days. Our house had faded white siding and a porch swing Harold promised to repaint 10 summers ago. He never did. Harold Foster was 74, a retired factory supervisor, a hard-working man his entire life. Quiet, responsible, dependable in the practical ways. But emotional? No. Not even close. When we were younger, I used to think his silence meant strength. That was how men of his generation survived. They worked, they provided, they came home tired. I accepted that for many years. Too many years, maybe. I was a retired librarian. I loved books because books spoke when people didn't. They filled empty rooms. They made loneliness feel less embarrassing somehow. We had one daughter, Claire. She lived in Arizona with her husband and 2 teenage boys. Good kids, busy lives. We talked maybe twice a month if schedules lined up. At this age, everyone says family matters most. But nobody tells you how far away family can feel. That winter had been especially cold. Harold spent most days in his recliner watching old westerns with the volume too loud. Sometimes I wondered if he even noticed me moving around the house anymore. One Tuesday evening, I made pot roast, his favorite. I placed the plate in front of him carefully. He kept staring at the television. "Smells good," he muttered. That was it. Not a smile, not eye contact, nothing. We ate while some cowboy on television got into a fist fight in a dusty saloon. Forks clinked against plates. The heater rattled in the hallway. After 20 minutes, Harold stood up. "I'm going to head upstairs." I looked at him. "That's all?" He paused. "What do you mean?" "I made your favorite dinner." "And it was good." I felt foolish immediately, like a child asking for approval. But something inside me was tired. Not angry, just tired. "You haven't really talked to me in days," I said quietly. He sighed, not cruelly, just impatiently. "Marilyn, we're sitting together every day. That's not the same thing." He rubbed his forehead. "I don't know what you want me to say." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have, because after 48 years, I didn't know anymore either. Later that night, I sat in the living room alone. A lamp glowed beside me while snow fell softly outside the window. Harold was already asleep upstairs. I looked around the room we had shared for decades. The old family photos, the stitched blanket my mother made before she passed, the dent in the carpet where Harold's recliner always sat. A whole life inside one room, and yet the silence felt enormous. I picked up my phone and almost called Claire, but it was late, and honestly, what would I even say? "Hi, sweetheart. Your mother feels invisible. Children have their own burdens." So I put the phone back down. The next morning, Harold barely touched breakfast before leaving for the garage. He spent hours out there these days, pretending to organize tools that had already been organized 100 times. I watched him through the kitchen window. Gray coat, slow steps, shoulders slightly bent with age. For a moment, I felt guilty. At least they were talking. When I got home, Harold was asleep in the recliner again, television flickering across his face. I stood there holding grocery bags. He didn't even wake up. I carried everything inside myself. The groceries, the silence, the marriage, all of it. That evening, Claire finally called. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded rushed but cheerful. I smiled anyway. "Hi, sweetheart. You doing okay?" Such a simple question, but sometimes simple questions hurt the most. "Yes," I lied gently. I could hear my grandsons arguing in the background. Claire laughed. "Sorry, the boys are impossible tonight." "It's okay. You and Dad doing all right?" I looked toward the living room where Harold sat staring at television light again. "We're fine." Another lie. Claire started telling me about school schedules and soccer practice and rising grocery prices. I listened carefully because mothers never stop listening. But halfway through the call, she suddenly paused. "Mom?" "Yes?" "You seem sad." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "No, honey, just tired." There was silence for a second. Then she said something that stayed with me. "You know, sometimes I worry about you." I forced a little laugh. "Why?" "I don't know. You sound lonely lately." I looked down at my hands. Age spots, thin skin, a wedding ring that suddenly felt heavier than usual. "It's nothing," I whispered. But after we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen for nearly an hour without moving, because someone had finally noticed, and somehow that made it worse. A week later, something small happened. Tiny, really. But sometimes tiny moments crack open years of buried feelings. I was carrying a laundry basket downstairs when I slipped slightly near the last step. Not a full fall, just enough to scare me. The basket dropped, towels scattered everywhere. "Harold?" I called instinctively. No answer. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been. "Harold!" I walked into the living room. He had headphones on, watching television, completely unaware. I stood there looking at him, and suddenly an awful thought entered my mind. What if one day something really happens to me and nobody notices? At this age, we understand things differently. We stop fearing embarrassment. We start fearing invisibility. That night, while Harold slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling for hours, and for the first time in nearly 5 decades of marriage, I quietly wondered if two people could stay together their whole lives and still lose each other completely. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. That was becoming normal for me lately. Older people sleep strangely. We drift in and out of memories more than dreams. Harold was still asleep beside me, snoring softly. The blue glow from the digital clock showed 5:12 a.m. I looked at him for a long moment. His face had changed so much over the years. Deep lines around his eyes, thinning gray hair, rough hands resting on top of the blanket. This was the man I had loved since I was 23 years old. The man who held my hand during Claire's birth. The man who worked double shifts so we could afford our first home. The man who once drove 3 hours in a snowstorm because I casually mentioned craving cherry pie from a diner we loved. That man existed. I know he did. So where had he gone? Or maybe the harder question was this: where had we gone? I slipped quietly out of bed and went downstairs. The house felt cold. I wrapped myself in an old beige cardigan and started coffee. Outside, the sky was turning pale gray. I stood by the kitchen window holding my mug with both hands. Across the street, Mr. Calloway was slowly picking up his newspaper in slippers and a robe. Same routine every morning. Aging makes life smaller. The same roads, the same stores, the same habits, and if we are not careful, the same silence. Later that afternoon, I decided to clean the hallway closet, not because it needed cleaning, mostly because I needed something to do with my hands. Inside were years of forgotten things: old board games, Claire's winter coat from high school, a broken lamp, photo albums. I sat on the floor and opened one slowly. There we were, young, laughing. "When was that?" he asked. I looked up, startled. "County Fair. Claire was 6. He nodded slowly. For a moment, I thought maybe he would sit beside me. Maybe he would remember too. Maybe we would talk. Instead, he cleared his throat. "You seen my flashlight?" And just like that, the moment disappeared. I handed him the flashlight from the top shelf. "Thanks." Then he walked away. I sat there on the closet floor, feeling foolish again, like someone still knocking on a door that nobody planned to open. That evening, we watched television together without speaking much. A game show, bright lights, fake laughter. At one point, I looked over and realized Harold had fallen asleep sitting upright. The television reflected across his face. And suddenly, he looked old. Not distant, not frustrating, just old. Something softened inside me then. Because maybe loneliness was sitting beside him too. Maybe we were both trapped inside ourselves after all these years. I covered him gently with a blanket. He woke slightly. You fell asleep." "Oh." I waited. Then quietly I asked, "Harold, are you happy?" His eyes opened a little wider. What kind of question is that? A real one. He stared at the television for several seconds. Finally, he shrugged. "I don't know anymore." Those words hit me harder than shouting ever could, because they sounded honest and tired, very tired. The next few days felt strange after that conversation. Not better exactly, but different, like two people silently realizing something fragile had cracked between them. Thursday afternoon, I found Harold sitting alone at the kitchen table. No television, no garage, just sitting there staring into nothing. "You okay?" I asked. He blinked slightly. "Yeah," but he didn't sound convincing. I sat across from him carefully. After a minute, he said quietly, "Jimmy passed away." I frowned. "Jimmy who?" "From the plant. Worked with me 30 years. "Oh no." Harold nodded once. "Heart attack." I reached for his hand instinctively, but he pulled it back to rub his chin before I could touch him. Not intentionally cruel, just unfamiliar with comfort. Men from his generation often treated emotions like dangerous things, something to avoid touching directly. "When did you find out?" "This morning." "I'm sorry." He nodded again. Not fear of death exactly, fear of disappearing. That night, Harold stayed awake longer than usual. Around midnight, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed in darkness. "You all right?" I whispered. He startled slightly. "Yeah." "You keep saying that." He sighed heavily. Then finally, without looking at me, he asked, "Do you ever think about how much time is left?" The room became very still. "Yes," I admitted. "All the time lately." He nodded slowly. "My father retired at 65, died at 76. You're not your father. I'm closer than I used to be." I didn't know what to say, because at our age, these conversations stop being dramatic. They become practical, real. The body slows down. Friends disappear. Doctors start speaking more carefully. And somewhere deep inside, you begin counting seasons without meaning to. Harold rubbed his hands together quietly. Then he said something I never expected to hear from him. "I don't think I did this life very well." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard. "I worked all the time. Thought that was enough." Emotion rose suddenly in my chest. "Harold," but he shook his head. "I'm serious. I look back now and, I don't know, feels like I missed things." I had waited years to hear words like that. Years. And yet now that they were finally here, they made me sad instead of relieved. Because time had already passed. So much time. "I miss things too," I whispered. He looked at me then, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in a long while. And in that quiet darkness, I saw something fragile inside him. Regret. The next morning, I found an old note sitting beside my coffee cup. 3 simple words written in Harold's shaky handwriting. "Thanks for dinner." That was all. No grand apology, no emotional speech, just 3 words. But I sat there staring at that note with tears in my eyes. Because sometimes, after years of silence, small kindness feels enormous. Still, loneliness does not disappear overnight. That afternoon, Claire called again. "You sound different today," she said. "Do I?" "Yeah, softer somehow." I glanced toward the garage window where Harold was fixing something old and unnecessary again. "I think your father is scared," I admitted quietly. Claire was silent for a moment. Then she whispered something that broke my heart a little. "He always loved you, Mom. He just never knew how to say it." After the call ended, I sat alone in the kitchen again. But this time the silence felt different. Not empty exactly. More like 2 people standing very far apart, trying slowly to find their way back. 2 weeks later, Harold forgot my birthday. Not completely. That would have almost hurt less. Instead, he remembered around 4 in the afternoon, after seeing the unopened card sitting on the counter. I was washing dishes when he walked into the kitchen, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Marilyn?" I kept rinsing a plate quietly. "I forgot." "Yes," I said softly. He stood there awkwardly for several seconds. "I'm sorry." I nodded once. The thing about long marriages is this. The pain usually doesn't come from one big moment. It comes from tiny disappointments repeated quietly over many years. Forgotten conversations, half listening, missed anniversaries, emotional absences nobody else can see. By 72, those small wounds begin living inside you permanently. That evening, Harold drove to the grocery store and returned with flowers that looked rushed and slightly wilted. Yellow carnations, my least favorite. But I thanked him anyway, because after decades together, you learn to appreciate effort even when it arrives late. We ate dinner in near silence again. Finally, Harold cleared his throat. "What did you want to do today?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the question came 10 hours too late. "I didn't want anything special," I said. That was partly true. What I really wanted could not be bought at a grocery store anyway. I wanted presence, attention, to feel chosen again. After dinner, I went upstairs early. I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing my hair slowly, while the bathroom light glowed softly behind me. A few minutes later, Harold entered the room. He looked nervous. I had seen him nervous maybe 3 times in our entire marriage. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." He stayed standing near the dresser. "Are you unhappy with me?" The honesty of the question startled me. I put the brush down carefully. "I don't know how to answer that." "Try." I looked at him for a long moment. Then finally I said the truth. "I think I stopped feeling important to you." The room became painfully quiet. Harold lowered his eyes immediately. And somehow that hurt more than if he had argued, because deep down, he knew it was true. "I worked hard for this family," he said quietly. "I know. I gave you everything I could. I know that too." Then what happened? There it was, the question sitting between us after nearly 50 years. What happened? I felt tears gathering unexpectedly. "You stopped talking to me, Harold." "I'm talking now." "Now," I whispered. He sat down heavily in the chair near the window. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me again. "When my father came home from work," he said slowly, "nobody bothered him." I listened quietly. He sat in his chair, ate dinner, watched television. That was life. "You're not your father. I know that now." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Very slightly, but enough. At this age, even tiny emotional moments feel enormous because they happen so rarely. I moved closer slowly. "You know what the saddest part is?" I asked. He looked at me. "I spent years making excuses for your silence because I knew you loved us." Harold stared at the floor. "But eventually," I continued softly, "love that is never spoken starts feeling invisible." His eyes filled suddenly. Not fully, but enough for me to notice. And Harold Foster was not a man who cried. "I didn't know how," he whispered. Something inside me broke then. Not from anger, from understanding. Because maybe that was true. Maybe this man had spent his whole life carrying responsibility, but never learned emotional closeness. His father probably never hugged him, never talked about feelings, never apologized. Men like Harold were taught survival, not tenderness. Still, but he tried. I watched him moving awkwardly around the kitchen. "You don't have to stare like I'm performing surgery," he muttered. I smiled despite myself. Well, the toast is fighting for its life. For the first time in months, he smiled back immediately. A real smile. Small, tired, but real. Maybe you have felt this too. How strange it is when warmth returns to a relationship slowly after years of emotional winter. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just tiny moments. Shared coffee, longer eye contact, less silence at dinner. That afternoon we sat together watching snowfall through the living room window. No television, just quiet, but peaceful quiet this time. Then Harold said something unexpected. "You remember our anniversary trip to Tennessee?" I laughed softly. "The cabin with no heat and the broken shower, and you getting lost for 2 hours. I wasn't lost. You absolutely were." He chuckled under his breath. Then his face softened. "You looked beautiful there." I froze slightly. because I honestly could not remember the last time my husband had called me beautiful. At 72, compliments arrive differently. They no longer feel exciting. They feel emotional, almost painful. I looked away quickly before tears formed. "Thank you," I whispered. But healing is never simple. That evening, while folding laundry upstairs, I suddenly felt dizzy. Just for a second, the room tilted slightly. I grabbed the dresser until it passed. Harold noticed immediately. "You okay?" Just stood up too fast, but his face changed instantly. Concern. Real concern. "You sure?" "Yes." Still, he followed me downstairs afterward like he didn't fully trust my answer. And strangely enough, that touched me more than flowers ever could. Later that night, I woke up coughing hard. My chest felt tight. Before I could even sit up fully, Harold turned on the lamp. "You all right?" His voice sounded genuinely frightened. "I'm okay." But he stayed awake beside me for nearly an hour afterward. I pretended not to notice. The next morning, I found him sitting alone at the kitchen table again. Only this time, when I entered the room, he reached for my hand first and quietly said, "I don't want to lose you before I learn how to love you properly." When Harold said those words, I did not answer right away. Not because I didn't feel something, because I felt too much. At 72, emotions move differently through you, slower, heavier. They carry years inside them. I sat down across from him quietly. Morning light spilled across the kitchen floor. The coffee maker hissed softly behind us. And there we were, two old people staring at each other after nearly half a century together, trying to understand what was left. Harold looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally, like a man finally setting down something heavy he had carried his whole life. "I should have done better," he whispered. I studied his face carefully. There was no defensiveness anymore, no impatience, just regret. And strangely enough, that made me grieve for him too. Because people often talk about lonely wives, nobody talks about emotionally lost husbands. Men who were taught to provide but never taught how to connect. Men who spent entire lifetimes hiding fear behind routine. I reached across the table and touched his hand gently. "You were never cruel, Harold." His eyes lowered immediately. "But you disappeared sometimes," I said softly. He nodded. "I know. And after a while, I stopped asking you to come back." That sentence seemed to break something inside him. He covered his face briefly with one hand. "I thought if I worked hard enough, that was love. For your generation, maybe it was, but not for you." Tears filled my eyes then. "No," I whispered, "not for me." Outside, snow continued falling slowly across the neighborhood. Everything looked softer under snow, even old pain. For the next few weeks, something changed inside our home. Not perfectly, not magically. Real life does not work that way, but slowly. But it was connected silence now, not empty silence. One afternoon, he surprised me by pulling out old photo albums from the hallway closet himself. Because for years, I assumed he hadn't noticed those little moments. But maybe he had. Maybe love had been sitting quietly inside him all along, unable to speak properly. That realization hurt and healed me at the same time. A few days later, Claire called again. This time, Harold actually sat beside me during the conversation. Then suddenly he said, "We should visit them this summer." I looked at him carefully. "You hate traveling." "I know. You complain the entire time." "I know that too." I laughed softly, and for the first time in years, the laughter felt natural. One evening in early spring, we sat on the porch swing together, watching the sunset melt across the sky. The air still carried winter cold, but softer now. Harold held 2 mugs of tea awkwardly. "Careful," I warned, "you'll spill." "I got it." He immediately spilled a little. I smiled. Some things never change. We sat there quietly, listening to distant birds and passing cars. Then Harold suddenly said, You know what scares me most? What? That I almost missed the end of our life together. The words settled heavily between us. At this age, we understand things differently. Young people think relationships fail loudly, but many marriages fade quietly. Two people become roommates, then strangers, then polite ghosts moving around the same house. And sometimes they stay that way forever. We almost did. I leaned my head gently against his shoulder. His coat smelled like sawdust and old cologne. Familiar, safe, a lifetime inside one scent. You didn't miss it, I whispered. His hand slowly covered mine. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We simply watched the sky darken together. Months passed, not dramatically, just life continuing. Harold still forgot things sometimes, still became quiet too often, and I still carried old hurt inside me occasionally. Healing does not erase history, but something important had returned between us. Attention, care, presence. One rainy afternoon, I found Harold repairing the porch swing he had ignored for 10 years. You finally remembered, I teased. He tightened a bolt carefully. Took me long enough. Yes, it did. He looked up at me then. You stayed anyway. My throat tightened unexpectedly, because he finally understood. Marriage is not only staying through the beautiful years, it is surviving the lonely ones too, especially the lonely ones. That night, while getting ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Wrinkles, silver hair, softness age leaves behind. For years I mourned growing older, but standing there that night, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not perfect happiness, not erased regret, just peace. Because loneliness inside marriage is one of the heaviest sadnesses a person can carry. And somehow, after all these years, we had finally started telling the truth. A week later, Harold reached for my hand while we walked through the grocery store parking lot. Such a small thing, but I nearly cried. Because when affection disappears for long enough, even tiny gestures feel sacred. As we walked slowly toward the car, snow clouds gathering again overhead, Harold squeezed my hand gently and quietly said, "I loved you the whole time, Marilyn. I was just bad at showing it." I looked at the man beside me, this stubborn, silent, aging man I had shared nearly 50 years with. And I realized something important. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it hides behind routine, behind exhaustion, behind fear, behind generations that taught people survival instead of softness. But hidden love still leaves damage when it goes unspoken too long. That is the truth nobody tells young couples. Before getting into the car, I touched Harold's face gently. "You still have time," I whispered. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in many years, I no longer felt completely alone.